Everybody would be nothing without a woman.
Hey, started out around the man with the geezers with me. She didn't want to talk about the chick. All of them talk, my bad ass still ain't listen. Was living, but taught me the ways they.
Hey, isn't that music just like everything? Like, it's a great way to introduce. So we have to give a round of applause for that intro. By the way, I just saw another friend mention this. People drop off within the first 3 seconds. So if you don't keep people's attention in the first 3 seconds, people are no longer interested. I don't let that bother me too much. It is what it is. I try to blame other people for their short attention spans, not so much taking the onus for that. But there are things that you can do, meaning you can take that 1 minute and 30-second long intro and condense it down to about 3, 8, 15 seconds max. All right. But I am Danny Marie, your podcast bestie. I help businesses and creators use podcasting as a marketing tool so they can build trust with their audience and turn listeners into customers through clear content strategies, systems, and training. And by the way, if you are a business or an advertiser, I help you get in front of the right audiences so you can increase sales and brand awareness through podcast promotions, creator partnerships, and live activation. Another quick plug, we just listed on our website, plantopodcast.com/memberships, a new tier. So the first tier is become a part of our text line. So if you need a last minute guest, we got you. We'll send out a mass text blast. Of course, you can join any Facebook and get some of the same results, but it's not expediently. There's people that are going to be responding back to you and you already passed the time, right? You needed a last minute guest, hence the name last minute. So that's the purpose for the text line, is to communicate and get quick responses if you need a quick fill in. And then we have, I said all of that to say that we just added the podcast plug. So your one-stop shop to get everything you need to set up your full operations for your podcast. And then the other thing was, another thing we added was podcast directory. So it's not your typical podcast directory. It is you getting in front of people who are looking for a podcaster for user-generated content and a place where they can actually advertise their product, brand, or services. So your directory with us is not looking for another guest to be on your podcast and not looking for other people to find you because they just want to listen to a good podcast. It's to get in front of the right type of potential sponsors and advertisers. So that's the directory that we are building out. So more information can be found, plantopodcast.com/memberships. But I try to be here Monday through Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Of course, I'm your podcast bestie. So I'm delivering to you important information that I think can help you. Instead of you trying to mill piece all of this stuff together, I'm trying to share information that I think can help you on your podcast journey, things that maybe you're not doing your own research about, but you come to me, I'll try to relay it to you the best way possible so that you can be abreast of all information that relates to podcasting, AI, and then we try to sprinkle in some pop culture news in there as well. So today, the topic is the clipping economy. The clipping economy is becoming a real media strategy. Podcast clips are now functioning as a full-scale distribution system. Media companies, creators, and startups are aggressively using short-form clips to dominate algorithms on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Shorts, and X. And some creators are even paying clippers based on views. So yes, we knew that clips were instrumental. We knew that they were useful. We did not realize that there's actually brands, their sole focus is short form content. The only thing that they do is clip up episodes. And I know like Kev on stage, he says he has a YouTube for his short form, and then he has a YouTube for his long form. Are you guys taking it that far to do something like that, where you make a point to create something for your short form that does not overlap with your long form content? I think that's a whole entirely different strategy, but this is what people are doing. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a bit. But venture capital firms are building media networks. Interesting, Horowitz, new Timeline native, his news network is creating conversation around the future of tech media, live stream journalism, and creator-hosted news ecosystems. The experiment is blurring the line between podcasting, streaming, and media infrastructure. I know that is a huge talking point in the podcast community. What is the landscape of podcasting? Does it include streaming? A lot of people feel like since they live stream, they are a podcast. And so they use these words interchangeably. What makes your podcast a podcast is if your podcast is on an RSS feed, real simple syndication. So nowadays you have YouTube, who does have a category for podcasting where you can add your RSS feed too, but there are steps and levels that go into this. You cannot just coin yourself as a podcast simply because you show up and you're talking. You are nothing more than a live streamer. Like I am right now in this current space and time, I'm only live streaming. This does not go up on my podcast platforms. But if I wanted to, I could download this file, the MP3 that is, upload it to a podcast platform, i.e. Red Circle, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple, and it will be sent across the podcast distribution channels, right? Where people stream podcasts. But you cannot just say, I have a podcast simply because I am on a live. There are two different things, not the same thing. If you don't go take the extra step to list your podcast on any RSS feed, you're just live streaming. No shade. I'm just telling you the truth. All right. So now going back to the point that was made, the experiment is blurring the lines between podcasting and streaming and media infrastructure, because I think podcasting is also still a very new medium, even though it's been around since early 2000s, it's still fairly new. And so with AI, things are changing very quickly. I think we're starting to figure out like where things are headed, and we have our fingers on the pulse of where things are going. And so now you're starting to see the lines kind of get blurred, and people are confused. So that's why, again, I'm here Monday through Friday, 12:30 p.m. PST, to try to keep you abreast of all of this information. Even though the lines are blurred, there is still a big difference between live streaming versus podcasting. My thought is you should do it all and do them all well and simultaneously to get the most of the algorithm and the most of an audience. Moving on, generative AI is now fully embedded in the creator economy. Industry discussions are shifting from should creators use AI to how do creators scale responsibly with AI? So it's not a fact of should I be using this? The answer is yes, emphatically, yes, you need to be using AI, whether it's to cut up your long form content into short form content, or whether it is to remove filler words from your content, or if it is to add a B-roll that's created by AI, or if it's to come up with the script. People are doing things to make the process easier and streamlined with AI, but now it's how do I use it responsibly, right? That's the now factor. AI is increasingly becoming used for editing, scripting, clipping, partnerships, monetization workflows, and audience engagement. But using AI responsibly, where your voice still shows up in the content, where the information is as accurate as possible. If not accurate, at least you give a disclaimer like, hey, this is AI. This information came from AI. We don't know how accurate it is. Make sure you do your own research. Give those disclaimers, right? But now it is here. It has arrived, and I can't wait to see what is next in the world of AI, technology, and podcasting. Some AI news, investments, and acquisitions and major developments, starting with Alphabet ramps up AI spending. So Google parent company Alphabet is raising billions more in debt financing as AI infrastructure spending explodes industry-wide. Everybody's trying to get a handle on AI. Everybody's trying to invest and create companies where AI is an extra leg to what they do. So that means if corporate, government, all of these bigger agencies and bigger platforms, bigger corporations, if they're using AI, your simple-minded ass should be using AI too. I'm just saying. You got to look at the signs, right? If big corporations are spending millions and billions of dollars, we know that you don't necessarily have access to that kind of money. But if they're willing to take that leap and that jump, that is a huge indicator that maybe you should be thinking more about AI too. Apple is signaling a more aggressive AI strategy with speculation around future acquisition and expanded AI investments tied to Siri, Gemini partnerships, and enterprise AI tools. Jensen Huang pushes back on AI fear narrative. So I talked about this, I think, on Monday. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang publicly criticized extreme AI doom predictions, arguing the conversation around AI and jobs has become exaggerated and disconnected from reality. I don't know if that's true. I don't know where I stand on that. I don't know where I stand on that. Do I want to trust NVIDIA, the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang? Because I know he has his own personal agenda. Or do I want to believe these fear-mongering tactics that make people afraid of AI, because people who are afraid of AI typically don't want to engage with it. Therefore, there's more room for other people to sneak and creep in. I don't know. I think that where I stand is I take the meat and the substance from both sides. I think there's people who are fear-mongering, and I think that there are people like Jensen who has an appreciation for technology and who's saying, hey, let's all just pace ourselves and brace ourselves. It's not all that bad in what people make AI out to be. I'm somewhere neutral in the middle. That's how I've always been. I'm very diplomatic in that way, that I try to think of things from both sides of the coin. Yes, I think somewhere down the line, AI is going to push people out of their jobs. I mean, we see that now. Yes, I do think that there's a lot to be considered when it comes to the use of AI. And I think that we should be all using AI responsibly, but there are people out there, as like with everything, who abuse technology to take your data, take your information, to whatever, hack, and all of the other things. But right now, if you are not tapping into AI, you're letting fear get the best of you, and then you're also letting opportunities escape you. So that's my take on it. AI voice plus podcast technology continues to advance. So open source podcast focused voice models and AI generated podcast tools continue expanding rapidly, lowering barriers for creators to launch audio content faster and cheaper. Some of the podcasts that I listened to, the Mel Robbins podcast, her latest notable episode, Harvard Business School professor, This One Research, featuring research-backed behavioral insights. Podcast Hub. So I'm going to go to Mel Robbins' most recent episode to figure out what that was about. Of course, Gary Vee. I don't necessarily like to follow him too much. Like I can only take him in small doses, because I do think he's one of those people where maybe he doesn't explicitly play into all the fear mongering. A lot of the stuff that he says is like, get your ass together because AI is taking over. It's still kind of embedded in a lot of the fear mongering, even though he doesn't explicitly state it and yell from the rooftops. And then I also think about Gary Vee, where at the beginning, it felt like he had his finger on the pulse. Now I feel like because he has so many people's attention, he can just say anything and everybody takes that as Bible. It's almost like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? When it comes to Gary Vee, I think he just says stuff. And because everybody's listening to him, that's what they move towards. He could just be making stuff up out of his butt crack. So like, I know one of the biggest things that he talks about now, like on TikTok, is like this QVC experience that everybody's creating. Shopping live, in live streaming, shopping, something like that. I don't know the technical term. So everybody's starting to do that. We see that on TikTok, but now everybody's listening to Gary Vee. And so now that's what everybody's going to do because Gary Vee said it. So he stamped it. And so that's what everybody's doing. But you didn't see that before he said it unless it was on TikTok. But now everybody's doing it. So that's what becomes Bible. So I think it's one of those things like he's garnered so much attention that he's just saying things. They're not early predictions. They're just things that he says and pulls out of his butt, maybe because he has other inside scoops, so he knows the influence and impact he has on the culture. So he's pushing people to stuff and making things up as he goes. It's my kind of conspiracy theory brain. That's why I can only take Gary Vee in small doses. Emma Grede, I listen to her, and these are some of the top 1% of podcasts that I like to listen to. So these are the ones that I share with you. You take it and do what you do with it. If you don't listen to them, it's not I'm not tied to these people. I'm not endorsed by these people, but I just think that they provide great content for some of you guys who are interested in podcasting into personal development and all of these things. So Emma Grede is one of those other ones that I was listening to a lot more before she went on her campaign. But some of her current conversations remain centered around women in leadership, scaling modern brands, business ownership, and creator in entrepreneurship. If you don't know Emma Grede, she was a presence on Shark Tank. She is co-owner of Good American Jeans, I believe, and co-owner of Skims. So she does know her stuff. 7 p.m. in Brooklyn with Carmelo Anthony. Current episodes currently talking about NBA playoffs, sports culture, athlete, and entertainment crossover conversations. The reason why I like that show is because I do have a podcast called Host City Hustle where we talk about the business of sports. So it's not solely focused on any particular sport in particular, or how people perform. It's more so, why aren't we all tapping more into the business economy, the sports world, and capitalizing on all of the funding that circulates in that industry. Some of the themes amongst the top 1% podcasters, current winning categories are personality-driven commentary, self-improvement, business and mindset, sports culture, creator economy analysis, and reaction style media, and strong ongoing performers. Of course, these people stay in the top 1%, the Mel Robbins podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, Call Her Daddy, The Diary of a CEO, and New Heights. Another reason why I feel it's important for me to be front-facing and talk to you about everything's happening in podcasting is because this list is full of white people. Nothing against them, but I just feel like in every industry, we always constantly see the very staggering difference between the communities of color and then our counterparts. And you always see them in the top 1%. Not to say that there aren't Black and brown people in the top 1%, but it's always these same people taking up space and getting all of the opportunities. And so another reason why I'm very passionate about what I do is to see more communities of color get some of the things that are rightfully owed to them. And I think that we do have a responsibility to have platforms to disseminate information to our communities because there's a vested interest to erase our history that is across mediums, across platforms, that is in the libraries, in the bookstores, in the museums, and podcasting. BET, you guys have recently heard the news of Tyler Perry, I think, was going to take over BET. And then all of a sudden that's no more. So not to get into the politics and minutia of everything, but if you know, you know. Podcasts with strong clip ecosystems and recognizable personalities continue to outperform highly polished but less personal productions. Upcoming conferences and creator events. You have Podcast Movement. I don't know if that already happened, but Podcast Movement is one of the largest podcast industry conferences covering monetization, creator growth, AI tools, video podcasting, and sponsorships. I know another one in July, the Podcast Summit with David Shands. Of course, Earn Your Leisure. I don't know when they're doing their festival, but that's coming up. We have VidCon, major creator economy event focused on YouTube creators, brand deals, creator tools, and social media growth. I believe South by Southwest did happen, still heavily influencing conversations around AI, media, podcasting, digital storytelling, etc. All right. The word of the day, which we try to give you one vocabulary term that I think, again, can help many of you. So that word of the day is audience retention. Audience retention, how long people continue listening or watching before dropping off. When was the last time you had a check on when was the last time you looked at your analytics? And did you make any changes based on what information you found out? So I talk about this a lot. I was working with a client who was doing a 2-hour long episode. It was about sports. So he was interweaving basketball, baseball, football, and one other one. But come to find out, people were not watching past like the first 10 minutes. Not only does that feel like a gut wrench, a punch to the gut, it's gut wrenching, but also it's a waste of your time. What you could do in the case that you find out people are not listening for 2 hours is you can either cut up your episodes into smaller bite sizes, or you can just record, instead of recording a 2-hour long episode that nobody's going to listen to, just record 15 minutes, right? And then for people who want more, you can offer more, and you can give them more in Patreon or any other platform that has exclusive access. So I know Red Circle, you can do a general public front-facing podcast, or you can do an exclusive podcast. So think about it that way. Though the information may hurt, it's information that helps you make changes. So if people are not listening to your 2-hour long episode, maybe you cut it up in bite sizes and you disseminate it over time. Or maybe you take the first 15 minutes, you publish that to the general public, you take the rest of that and you put that behind a paywall. So audience retention, how long people continue listening or watching before dropping off. The reality is a lot of people don't watch my content for the full duration. 1 to 3 minutes on YouTube, at least YouTube analytics. It's much longer for the audio version, but that's why you need to know, who's listening and what changes should I make based on the information in the data. I just think people have short attention spans. Sometimes you use that information and you do with it what you will, but don't take it offensively if people are not listening for the full duration. Maybe people might come back at a later time. Maybe people just want to get some general information and some basic nuggets. But don't take it and be, completely offended that people are not listening for the full duration. There's information and things that you can do with that information to help you make better decisions about how you relay your content. Let's see. I think there were just a few other things I wanted to talk to you guys about. I don't know who this is, but going back to the topic of clipping, Amelia DeMoldenberg continues dominating interview culture. Conversations around her media strategy, ownership, and celebrity interviewing style are trending heavily in creator and podcast circles. AI plus creator burnout conversations continue to rise, with creators that are openly discussing pressure to post constantly, scaling content with AI, and balancing authenticity with volume. And clipping debates are exploding. Many creators are debating whether clip-first media is helping podcast growth or damaging long-form attention spans. I think people's attention spans are just ruined and damaged anyways. I feel sorry for people with short attention spans. That means you don't have the capacity. You don't have the capacity to learn. You're looking for something, you're always looking for something that feels engaging, that's feeding something that you obviously are lacking. So you go find that in other stuff that probably doesn't have a lot of substance. So I don't feel bad about people who have a short attention span. I will make accommodations, but I'm not going to completely rule out my long form content just because people have short attention spans. I will continue to produce maybe 30 minutes to 50 minutes max for the people who need it, and then repurpose it and put it up in like a course or a webinar. So I have a lot of that stuff that's already up. But that's how you feel like you're still doing something that feels worth your time. You're still doing something that means something to you. It's like not to be offended by the fact that people are not engaging with long form content, so therefore you shouldn't do it anymore. It's just like, okay, this is where people are at. That doesn't mean everybody feels that way. I still have a chance. I could still repurpose my content. I could still splice it up into bite sizes to appease the people with short attention spans. And then I can take the long form content and put it up in a paywall so that people who really appreciate what I do will get the value, and they'll get it in abundance because I've saved all of these different long form pieces of content. That's all educational at the end of the day. All right, you guys. Coming to a close. I think today on the schedule, I think we're going to go back and listen to the Earn Your Leisure podcast because they had Jermaine Dupri. I think even later today, we want to read from this book that Juniad wrote about CRM tools and podcasting CRM tools in particular. So you guys can meet me, and I'll post later today about where you can find me so you can engage in the podcast watch party that we're going to do and the book reading that we're going to do. But every day, I'm going to make a point to also mention what's on the calendar so you all can participate, because at the end of the day, community is big to me, and I'm sure important to many of you, and community is also instrumental to a lot of your success as a podcaster. So that's why I'll do more of these events where we can meet each other online in different spaces. But the clipping economy, I hope you guys enjoyed and took some value from what we talked about today. Think about how you are clipping up your episodes. I asked a question earlier today in the Facebook group. How are people using the different verticals? How are you using your main feed versus your stories versus direct messaging versus reels? Because we all use it very differently. Is there a strategy or method to the madness, or are you just kind of doing things just because? I'm curious to know your thoughts, so please comment under this live or go find that post in our group, because I would be curious. Going back to this conversation about the clipping economy, how are you clipping and using your short form content to attract and engage with your audience? I am Danny Marie, your podcast bestie. I'll see you tomorrow on Friday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Hey,
But it wouldn't be nothing without a woman.
hey. Started out riding, man with the geezers, when this shit didn't work out, the pop about the chick. All of them talking